I'm joined today by the Canadian-American artist Angelique Nagovskaya. Angelique studied fine art and art history at Cornell University, New York, before moving to London to study painting at the Royal College of Art. She is currently based between Washington, D.C. and London. Her work invokes universal human experiences and emotions by showing figures without a clear identity. These figures are often positioned in plain, featureless spaces and perform the role of archetypes: a man on a horse, a mother and a child, a woman in a cave. As we may come on to, ambiguous relationships characterize her work, whether that is the relationship between the figures or the figures and the spaces that they are in. Over the course of this interview, I hope to discover a bit more about Angelique's work, what makes her tick as an artist, and where she's heading. Angelique, thanks for joining me today. I think you're joining us from New York, and it was a real pleasure to be talking to you. I want to start off by asking, when did you first realize that art was going to be important in your life?
I think art has always been an innate part of me for as long as I can remember. My grandmother loves to recount a story when, as a toddler, I was just mesmerized watching her draw a simple clove on a scrap piece of paper. To me, this was magic, and I would ask her to draw it again and again. I was determined to unravel this secret, and from that moment on, I was hooked. And growing up in an immigrant family, drawing became my preferred mode of communication. As my English skills lagged behind, I loved the permanence of it, making thoughts tangible and shareable. And in my teens, I was accepted to visual arts high school, and that marked a pivotal shift. Art became less about technical skill and more about purpose, meaning, and storytelling. My teachers challenged me to consider what do I what do I want to say to the world, and how can art drive change. I find art to be so special because it transcends language and brings humanity to the humans.
Yeah, and that's connected, I think, in some ways to the things that you paint now, the subjects that you paint now, which have got that, uh, you know, quite universal appeal. You deal with quite universal themes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I can see that in your work. What is it that keeps you making now?
What keeps me making now? It feels really innate to me, almost like a primal need um, to process the world. I think this process grounds me and helps me make sense of the world around me. It's kind of meditative. I get lost in my work and I find myself again through it. If I went too long without creating, I'd be a little bit lost. Art brings me back to center, reminds me of my purpose. It's an inexplicable drive in me to keep expressing myself through my work.
And so you talk about how you express yourself through your work. I want to get under the lid of that a little bit. I think quite often people that don't know artists or have never made work imagine that an artist visualizes the thing that they want to paint or the thing that they want to sculpt, and they take it from inside their mind and make it real, if you like. Like
Mm-hmm,
it's almost like
mm-hmm.
projecting something that's already there.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that how you work, or is there something else that goes on? What is your working process?
For me, creating a painting is a really intricate process from the conception to the completion. It begins with deciding on a central concept and carefully planning the composition, colors, and the intended emotional impact on the viewer. I start a lot of the time by free writing to crystallize my thoughts and ideas for the piece, and then I look through a catalog of collected images, manipulating and arranging them to best fit my vision. With this initial work done, I move to the canvas. The painting itself is an intuitive act of channeling the energy and purpose mapped in these initial stages. I allow for this flow state to take over as the brush meets the paint and meets the canvas. It's a multi-layered journey that requires meticulous forethought and creative expression. From the seed of the idea to the final brushstroke, thoughtful planning merges with spontaneous artistry to manifest the desired artwork. The combination of discipline and freedom breathes life into my visions.
When I've been looking at the photographs that you've got in your, the portfolio that you can connect to from your website, you've zoomed in on some areas, and I can see that there's, for instance, on the painting as Warmest Detachment, there's a kind of areas which are a bit more impasto,
right,
some which are a little smoother, and then there's a kind of scoring in places.
Yeah, I feel like with the painting though, it's a little. I feel like a lot of it is just intuitive. I just kind of feel it, so it is kind of hard for me to describe how am I painting because some things I know how I'm doing and I plan it out. I have my drawing and I have this foundation, this frame for the drawing underneath, but then a lot of it I just kind of am in my flow, and sometimes I have a light stroke of paint and then I go thicker and I just kind of feel it somehow. There's no specific process really.
That's interesting because there is the consistency in how you set up the parameters. So your work hangs together as a body of work, clearly, and it's thematically linked. But there's that sort of playful discovery in all of your work.
Yeah.
That's amazing. It's amazing to hear you talk like that. But you have this. Sounds to me like you have a kind of scaffold that you build around what you do, and then once the scaffold is in place, you can play.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm really interested to hear a bit more about the writing that you mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, I have a journal and I do free writing, just automatic writing. Whatever I have in my head, I write down, and through that, I end up discovering something new.
So before setting up, so let's talk about a specific piece of work. Let's talk about As Warm as Detachment. So As Warm as Detachment is one of the works we've got in the Vieunite library. It's a work that I love all of your work, but it's work that I'm particularly interested in. I'm interested in learning more about. So just to describe it very briefly for our viewers, there'll be, in fact, we can put an image on the screen. So there's a figure of presumably a mother and a child.
It could be. It could be that. It could be someone else. It could be whoever.
It could be. It could be.
Yeah.
In my introduction, I mentioned archetypes, and actually there's a lot of projection in that. I've just realized. So when I say, is it entirely projection? Your titles, Man on a Horse, do, lead the viewer towards a particular interpretation.
Right. And sometimes I do want. Oh, sorry.
There isn't a clue like that in As Warm as Detachment, and I just read it as being a mother and child because that's like, it's an image that you see so often in art that,
Yeah.
but of course there's not much in the image to indicate that it is a mother with her child. It might not. I realize now that I've just projected that myself onto the work. So it's a painting of a figure with a smaller figure,
Right.
in the context of an environment with quite a lot of ambiguity in it, actually. So there's quite a lot of your figures seem like they've been molded out of clay. And in this particular work, there is a kind of ambiguity about the edges of the two figures and then the environment that they're in, as though they could all be made of the same substance somehow.
Yeah.
That's what I see when I look at it.
Yeah. And a lot of the time also with the automatic writing, I pair it with automatic sculpting. So I have clay as well, where I just sculpt whatever. I create these creatures, and these become references for me as well.
So in the painting Spanish Summer, which is a collection of forms against a warm earth tone, not a sort of yellow, earthy yellow background, that very much looks like something that's been made out of clay and then painted. Is that actually how you work?
Yeah, sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So let's go back to that painting, As Warm as Detachment.
Mhm.
Um, you've got the automatic writing. You've decided on the palette, and then you stretch the canvas and you prime it, and then, as you say, you get into the state of flow. Does your own work surprise you?
Definitely. I think I have a vision of what I want it to be. And then sometimes through this flow state, something else happens, some accident, some different color, and I'm surprised it's better than what I thought I wanted.
So, sticking with this piece of work, what do you want people to take? What do you want viewers to take away from the experience of this painting, As Warm as Detachment?
I want to have them have a sense of wonder and contemplation, just like you have had now as we're talking. I want them to slow down and immerse themselves in the details of the painting and reflect on their presence within in front of this piece, and then think about their own lives. How do they connect with it? What does this remind them of? What feeling does it give them? How can I want there to be a connection, to be an experience?
But you don't want to be very prescriptive about exactly what the experience would be.
Yeah. And I think that allows anyone to feel like they can connect to it. They don't have, they could see themselves in the painting. They could, you know, feel like it is a mother and child. They could feel like it is a relationship between two people. They could impose their own thoughts onto the painting and in that way get closer to it.
Hmm. And I guess that's typical of all of your work.
I think so. I think that's my aim.
So, Angelique, the generosity of that approach, this kind of openness that you've talked about in the painting As Warm as Detachment, is typical of your work in general.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
And does that connect with the some of the ambiguity that I mentioned in the introduction? That ambiguity between the figures in the paintings and the relationship, in some cases, between the figure and the ground.
Um, yeah, I think that growing up, I had so many identities, and I felt like I wanted to paint about it, and I didn't know, do I focus on this? Do I focus on that? But I felt if we take away identity altogether, I would feel like this is a representation of me. This could be a representation of whoever else. I felt closer to it when it didn't have this identity.
That's really interesting. So a lot of artists at the moment, there's a lot of issues and identity based work that you see in art schools. If you go around any art school in the UK, you'll see students making work about themselves and their own experience in a kind of biographical manner.
Hmm.
Um,
And I felt pressured for that in art school as well. I felt pressured to make the queer art, to make art about, being a person of color, being a woman, and I didn't know if I felt like that felt in a way limiting for me.
and limiting for the viewer.
Yeah.
You're either going to that way, you're either going to get a connection with someone who already knows what you're talking about, or I think otherwise there's a danger that the viewer would feel excluded. but there's a way into
Yeah.
everything that you make. If the viewer approaches
Yeah.
your work with a playful and open mindset, they'll
Yeah.
be able to engage with it in some way.
Yeah. Whoever you are, you can engage in it.
Yeah. So it sounds to me a bit like you don't have a message, but you have you have a modality of experience that you want to share with people.
Yeah. And I think these are universal experiences that we all share, and maybe we don't have the words for them, but we have the feelings for them. And I just want to paint them.
That comes across really strongly in your work. The kind of, I mean, possibly because I'm a sculptor, so
Right.
I work with my fingertips.
Mm-hmm.
Painters do as well. It's a stupid thing to say, but you know what I mean. I push things around,
Right. Right.
and there is this quality in some of your work of this kind of like fingertippy molding, or sometimes almost of chewing, of something being chewed. That's
Mm-hmm.
really super intimate.
Mm-hmm.
I know
Yeah, I think
that's not a
that's why.
question, but it's a statement. Is that
Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
does that appall you, or does it sound about right?
I think that that's why I really liked using clay as my reference image, because you can mold it in whatever way you want and it kind of can mimic a figure. You don't need to have the figure just the way it is, the, that it's organic in some way. Um, yeah, so that was why I was using it as a reference.
And there's something so primal about clay. It's such a
Definitely.
fundamental material.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I'm struggling a little bit to take it away from this conversation because I find it such an interesting space to stay in. But for the purposes of brevity, I feel like I need to move the conversation on.
All right.
What do you feel to date is your biggest achievement as an artist?
I think I have two. One of them was when I was 17, 18. I won this National Young Arts Foundation. I was a winner for the National Young Arts, so that meant that I was the top 25 most promising young artists in the US. And I was taken to Miami, flown out to Miami, and I had master classes. And I met so many other, very talented kids and big artists in the art world. And I think that was really inspiring for me as a teenager. And I think my last big accomplishment was getting my MFA at the Royal College of Art. I had been planning to go there since I was 16, and it was really exciting to make that dream a reality. And I learned so much, and it really equipped me for my future art career.
Uh, the RCA is a great place to study, but before that, Cornell is not.
Yeah, Cornell was good too.
Yeah, so you've got fantastic pedigree in your education. Let's put it like that.
Yeah,
Clearly, it was recognised at an early age. So that
yeah, I
must have
guess
been quite
so.
a transformative event, winning this prize at a young. Did that help you to visualize yourself as an artist?
Yeah, I think it took me out of a little art school in high school and took me to this art world. And I was seeing art in a whole different way, inspired in a whole different way. And I felt like I could do it. I could be the artist.
Yeah. Um, so now you've got some works on the Vieunite platform,
Mm-hmm.
which is going to bring your work to a public that might not otherwise see your work. Um, why are you excited to be on Vieunite?
I'm excited by the potential of Vieunite's innovative digital canvas technology and community. I think this platform democratizes art and empowers people from across the globe to access, display, and engage with a variety of creative works. Um, I think that technology is the future, and I think this digital canvas is game changing. And working with Vieunite and reaching new audiences is really exciting.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to have you on the platform, and I'm really pleased that we're able to bring your work to a wider audience, and hopefully it will lead to opportunity for you as well as enjoyment for the people that are experiencing your work at home. For that audience that's encountered your work on the Textura canvas, what can they look forward to? What's happening next?
Right. So currently I'm developing 2 new collections and I can't wait to unveil them in the next couple months. And I'll be documenting my creative process and sharing behind the scenes on my Instagram account, Angelique_Nagovskaya. And that's a best place to have a glimpse of what I'm doing next and what's in store.
Angelique, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing insights into what you're working on right now. I look forward to seeing how that work develops, and hopefully we'll get more of your work in the Vieunite Art Library.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.